The first scene of the film unfolds as a deceptively quiet homecoming narrative that gradually reveals itself as a dense meditation on identity, disclosure, power, and the fragile ethics of intimacy between women, using Veronica and Katie as emotional mirrors rather than as engines of spectacle. And the recap of events is inseparable from a critical reading because the scene is built almost entirely from implication, pauses, and the charged space between what is said and what is restrained. Veronica's anticipation of the workday's end establishes her as a woman defined by responsibility and routine, someone whose life has been shaped by care, provision, and the long habit of putting her own interiority on hold, and her eagerness for Katie's return from college signals not merely maternal affection, but a deeper yearning for reconnection with a version of herself that feels increasingly distant. Katie's phone call announcing her arrival and her important news introduces the theme of confession, a ritual familiar to many queer women who have learned to rehearse truth before offering it. And the fact that this confession is prepared in advance underscores the emotional labor involved in coming out even within supposedly safe relationships. When Katie waits alone for Veronica to arrive home, the film lingers on her nervous energy, framing her tattoos and short hair not as rebellion but as evidence of self-authorship, visual shorthand for a young woman who has begun to claim her body and narrative as her own after years of being seen primarily through another's expectations. Veronica's reaction upon entering the bedroom is complex and quietly rendered. She is surprised but not alarmed, curious rather than judgmental, and the absence of anger or disappointment immediately positions the scene against the familiar cinematic trope of parental rejection. When Katie comes out as a lesbian, the moment is treated not as a rupture but as a relief, and Veronica's response, affirming and even joyful, reflects a generational tenderness that many queer women long for, yet rarely see depicted without caveat. The revelation that Veronica herself has had lesbian experiences in the past complicates this affirmation, introducing a shared vocabulary that collapses distance between them, while also blurring lines that the film intentionally leaves ethically unsettled. At its best, this exchange speaks to a truth within queer communities. That recognition can feel electric, that seeing oneself reflected in another woman can dissolve loneliness in an instant, and that intergenerational dialogue can be a source of healing in cultures where lesbian histories are often hidden or erased. However, the scene's emotional power also derives from its discomfort, because Veronica's subsequent admission of longing and curiosity is framed less as desire than as regret, a sense of time lost to obligation and fear, and the language she uses centers memory, feeling, and the ache of disconnection from a self she once knew. Katie's reaction is not sensationalized, it is rendered as shock layered with confusion, curiosity wrestling with the instinctive caution that many young queer women develop in response to uneven power dynamics, and the film wisely allows silence and hesitation to do much of the work. From a critical standpoint, the scene functions as an exploration of how easily emotional intimacy between women can be misread or misused when clear boundaries are absent, especially in relationships already structured by authority, care, and dependency. Rather than presenting the connection as romantic fulfillment, the narrative invites viewers to sit with the ethical tension, to recognize how longing can masquerade as understanding, and how the desire to be seen can override the responsibility to protect. This is where the film's queer lens becomes most vital, because it refuses to flatten lesbian experience into either taboo fantasy or sanitized ideal. Instead, it exposes the real-world pressures that shape how queer women negotiate closeness, often without adequate models for what healthy boundaries look like. Many lesbian and queer women will recognize aspects of themselves in Katie's careful negotiation. Her mix of excitement and restraint, her awareness that her truth has just shifted the relational ground beneath her feet. Similarly, Veronica embodies a familiar figure within women's lives, the older woman who represents possibility, mentorship, and validation, whose approval can feel intoxicating precisely because it has been withheld from the self for so long. The film uses this dynamic to comment on how women are socialized to conflate emotional caretaking with intimacy, to believe that sharing vulnerability automatically entitles one to closeness, and to struggle with disentangling support from self-gratification. Importantly, the scene's restraint, its refusal to depict action, keeps the focus on interior lives rather than behavior, emphasizing that the true drama lies in recognition and refusal, in the moment when feeling must be weighed against consequence. In this sense, the scene resonates beyond lesbian audiences, speaking to women more broadly who have been taught to prioritize others' needs, to suppress longing until it emerges in unexpected and sometimes inappropriate ways, and to mistake emotional connection for permission. The film also engages with society's persistent discomfort with women loving women, by showing how quickly such love is surveilled, questioned, or distorted, even when it appears in emotionally grounded forms. Veronica's need to contextualize her past experiences and Katie's fear of confession both arise from a culture that either erases lesbian intimacy or sensationalizes it, leaving little room for nuanced ethical exploration. By situating this discomfort within a domestic space, the narrative underscores how deeply these cultural tensions infiltrate private life, shaping how women see themselves and each other long before desire is named. The symbolic roles each woman plays are carefully calibrated, Katie as the emerging self, newly articulate but still vulnerable, and Veronica as the unresolved past, carrying both affirmation and unresolved grief. And their interaction mirrors real dynamics within queer communities, where age, experience, and authority can create imbalances that require deliberate care. The film does not excuse Veronica's confusion, nor does it vilify her. Instead, it presents her as a woman shaped by repression and social expectation, whose failure lies not in feeling but in momentarily losing sight of her responsibility. This distinction is crucial, because it allows the story to critique behavior without pathologizing lesbian desire itself, maintaining a clear line between authentic self-recognition and ethical misstep. For queer viewers seeking recognition rather than fantasy, the scene offers something rare, an acknowledgement that longing does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient, and that integrity is measured not by the absence of feeling, but by the choices one makes in response to it. The hopeful note suggested by the scene's closing question is deliberately ambiguous, inviting reflection rather than resolution, and the most responsible reading understands hope not as continuation of transgressive intimacy, but as the possibility of growth, honesty, and redefined connection grounded in care. In insisting on seriousness and emotional truth, the film challenges audiences to resist easy categorization, to sit with discomfort, and to recognize that visibility for women's love must include conversations about boundaries, power, and accountability. Ultimately, this scene contributes to a broader cultural conversation about how women come to know themselves in relation to others, how queer identity intersects with responsibility, and how tenderness must be accompanied by restraint to remain meaningful. It argues, quietly but firmly, that women's relationships deserve to be taken seriously precisely because they are complex, ethically charged, and worthy of respect, and that becoming visible to oneself is an ongoing process that requires courage not only to feel, but to protect, to choose care over impulse, and to honor the humanity of those we love in a world still learning how to see women's love for women without distortion.